Hello, I'm Professor Zach, and welcome to Zachipedia. Zachipedia, since you, or most of you, might not have seen my first episode, so luckily, I'm going to do a recap right now. Zachipedia is an online YouTube world history channel, or ancient history channel, that will help you study, teach, or just for your own amusement, learn about history or different facts or things in general. Now, what is the format of Zachipedia? Well, Zachipedia basically every month has a new subject spotlight, which is always listed in the description section. This one is basically recent wars that are practically unheard of. Now, every week I publish a new episode. This one's, or episode 2, is Falklands War. Now, that means that there are 4 episodes per subject spotlight. Now, let's get to the episode. The Falklands War, you could say, could be necessary or unnecessary, based on your take. But in this episode, I hope that you will learn the who, what, where, why, and when, and just how it happened. I mean, why would the 2 superpowers of Argentina and Great Britain have a conflict over a small overseas colony of mostly just grassland? Anyway, the only people who really lived on it were aristocrats or greedy plantation owners who had land or vacation homes there. Well, in this episode, you will learn why it was necessary, and whether you believe it was necessary or unnecessary, and why it happened, and how it was fought. Well, let's get started. The Falklands War began when on January 21st, 1982, Argentina invaded the overseas colony of the Falklands Islands, which had been a colony, as I said, of Great Britain for centuries. Why, do you ask? Well, at the time, Britain had just opened a new air base earlier that year, and the Argentinians were afraid that they might use the Falkland Islands as an air base to capture parts of South America and create the new Viceroyalty of New Spain. What was that exactly? Well, that was one of the largest colonies in the world a few centuries ago. And they thought that since the British was at their decline, that they might try to get their empire back by reincarnating that. You might think that it seems logical now. But let's see how it impacted the Falklanders. Well, first off, they put heavy taxes and tariffs on the Falklanders who lived there. And they also prevented in or out access from anyone except actual Falklanders, or besides actual, only people who could actually come in were South Americans, which they was racist and unfair. Now also, the only people that means who came in were poor or racist, or you could say weak people or ice fishers who lived on the Strait of Magellan. These people would come on the island and start breaking in and looting vacation homes that were abandoned, and start even killing any Falklanders who got in their way. Now, of course, nearby countries like France and the US were outraged, but they didn't want to get in because they were in the middle of a Cold War and a Great Depression. Now, though, the United Kingdom was the most outraged, for that was their land. I thought it was unfair that this was happening to the people who were desperately crying for help. So, on January 25th, they declared war on Argentina, but they didn't fight with just warships. Instead, what they did is they bribed Argentinian and Chilean settlers coming in, but not just with money. They also bribed with basic needs like food, water, and shelter. Now, however, they didn't give them much training, so they had to immediately go in with armor and weapons and fight to get back the Falkland Islands from the interior. The fighting lasted for about 3 months, and they didn't really gain much land. And there were a tremendous amount of casualties to get this small amount of land. So finally, on April 25th, the British sent in warships, Stanley, which is the capital. Now, they easily started fighting off the Argentine military and authorities. But before they got too much damage, after about a month of fighting, on May 21st, my apologies, 1982, they finally took over half of the Falkland Islands, which is their western half, which they called the Falkland Islands, and even a part of the Argentinian section, which was the eastern, which they called Islas et Malvinas. Before they did any more real damage, though, finally, France and the US came in and managed to negotiate a ceasefire between Argentina and the UK before they damaged each other anymore. And they also did something called the Treaty of Stanley, or also known as the Treaty of the Falklands, which created something called the Great Barrier, which had given the British the western half of the Falklands, which was Stanley, and the Argentinians the Islas et Malvinas, or the eastern side, which they kept. However, even after this, they still feared each other and had great quarrels, and unfortunately, about 11 years later, the British invaded the Argentine half. However, the Argentinians, though, were in the middle of a depression and an economic downfall. They were too weak to really do anything about it. The Falkland Islands are still united by this, or still united, you could say, today, by the British. However, there's no more war, and you could say that peace has been restored. But I hope this video taught you a lot about the Falklands War and different other quarrels between Britain and Argentina, and I hope that it can influence your take on the war.